Alhamdulillah, all praise be to God. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. Today, I would like to discuss some aspects of God's commandments regarding achieving, the same goal, continuation of kind of the previous week's sermon I spoke about achieving perfect happiness that God has promised us in this world. And so we see that it is, a process that involves, um, you know, um, a two-way it's a two-way promise, covenant that we have to keep our end of the agreement in order to get what God has promised us. And doing that involves a lot of things that we have to be mindful of. A lot of these things sometimes may appear very simple and very easy to follow, but we can be tested through them in various ways, sometimes that we don't even expect. And a lot of times, this is when we have our guards down, and things can hurt us. So God tells us in the Quran that for the believers, there's perfect happiness that God has promised. But sometimes we get caught up in small things like little traps, and it helps. It prevents us from um, prevents us from looking at the big picture. Which the big picture is that we are here to please God. We're here to show God that we will submit to Him under all circumstances. But through situations that may happen around us, little things here and there, we sometimes lose that big focus, and we start getting involved in the little things, and we may react in ways that goes against what God wants us to behave like. And as we can see in Surah 10 verse 62, God says, absolutely God's allies have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve, right? And so this is God's assurance to us that all the believers are guaranteed perfect happiness in this world and in the hereafter. But as I said earlier, we get caught up in these little things, little traps, and then we forget about the big picture, and we forget about the fact that all of this is designed for only one purpose, which is to test our absolute devotion and submission to God alone under every circumstance. So definitely we are here as a test, and Satan has promised God that he will come to us from every angle, from the left, from the right, from the front, from the back, and he will want to make us unappreciative of God in one way or another. And so it says in 7:17, I will come to them from before them and from behind them and from their right and their left, and you'll find that most of them are unappreciative. And so how does Satan do that? One of the easiest ways for Satan to make us do that is to let us complain, let us get sad about things, let us turn despondent, get into despair, complain, and get angry eventually. And so since it is part of our test to be able to worship God alone under all circumstances, sometimes we end up failing the test, and then as a consequence we end up getting pinches, we end up getting headaches, we end up getting other problems, we end up feeling sad, we end up feeling anxious, and so many other things, right? But God says the believers shall have no fear, nor will they grieve. So in a state of perfect happiness, we shouldn't have any anxieties or any fears or any kind of depression or any kind of grievances. We will naturally be happy. But just looking at these very things, every psychologist in the world will tell you that if you are getting agitated, if you're unhappy about things, if you're complaining about things, things are not going the way you want, and you start with that trail of thoughts, obviously you're going to be unhappy, right? But that's natural. But then also at looking at the in the bigger picture, that person who is exhibiting these traits naturally is not fully grasping the idea or fully consciously, believing in the idea that God is the one who's controlling everything and running everything. Of course, we believe it, but there are times when we forget about it, right? So those are the times that we're not remembering God. We're not remembering that He's running everything. God is not on our mind, because if God is on our mind, then we should be able to focus and see clearly things the way as they're happening, right? Like, for example, if something's not going my way and I start focusing on that thing that's not going my way, instead of thinking about like what's actually happening, that God is controlling the whole situation and running everything, I end up getting trapped and end up losing my focus, and I end up facing the consequences and suffering from it. And so, I mean, it's not something that, as we know, it's not something that's gonna come easy. I mean, we may feel that it's an easy concept for a lot of us to maybe understand, but then to practice it all the time, every single moment of our lives, it's an ongoing process, that will require a lot of effort and a lot of practice, if we really, really want to, get, the ranks that God has promised us, and if we really, really want to please God and make it under all circumstances, then that's something that we should all strive to work on every single day and remind ourselves as much as possible. A lot of times when things don't go our way, people object and they turn despondent. And so this is described in the Quran as fair weather friends. In 22:11 it says, among the people there is a one who worships God conditionally. If things go his way, he's content. But if some adversity befalls him, he makes an about face. Thus he loses both this life and the hereafter. Such is the real loss. And then 11:9 says, when we bless a human being with mercy from us, then remove it, he turns despondent, unappreciative. And 1783 says, when we bless a human being, he becomes preoccupied and heedless. But when adversity strikes him, he turns despondent. So looking at these verses, I mean, the first one, 22:11, when things are not going our way, sometimes we may stop worshiping God under all circumstances. And one may think that, no, I'm still worshiping God, I'm still going to do my prayers no matter what. But at that time when the adversity is happening, we're not happy with what God is doing. We're not okay with what God is doing, and we're not cheerfully accepting the situation as it is, knowing that God, just by knowing the fact that God is running everything. I mean, of course, a situation might not be in our favor, and we should be able to express it, that, okay, this is something that's, I wanted something to be this way, and it's not, but it should be in a way that it doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect our happiness. It shouldn't affect us emotionally in any way. Like, it shouldn't phase us. Like, okay, this is the way things are, but inshallah, God is the one who's doing everything. And, I can respond to it very differently, by the grace of God. And so also there is, as 11:9, God says, when we bless a human being with mercy from us and then remove it, he turns despondent, unappreciative. So, we may go into a cycle of when things are going good and we're appreciating God and praising God, but obviously when things are bad, when we turn despondent, we just fail, actually. And so we have to remember that that's one way of us being tested, and a lot of times we forget that. And 1783 is very good, a lot of times there are on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who like to worship God, who like to think about God and remember God and praise God and ask Him for the right outcomes when things are bad, right? And they do. But when things are good, then they forget about it, Then they just turn further and further away. until bad things happen again, and now they're heedless, because they have been experiencing so much good, and now immediately when the bad happens, they all of a sudden they just despair and object and all of those things. So people despair of God's grace when the going gets tough. There's other verses in the Quran. It says, when we bestow mercy upon the people, they rejoice therein. But when adversity befalls them as a consequence of their own works, they become despondent. So we may even end up in a cycle of bad things happening to us. We're doing good. When something bad happens, in order for us to be tested, we object, we respond in a negative way, and then more bad things will happen as a consequence. So we may end up in the cycle. And then you have the fair weather friends on the other end, as I said, where the human being, God says in 41:49, the human being never tires of imploring for good things, but when adversity befalls him, he turns despondent and desperate. But if touched by adversity, he becomes despondent. And the fair weather friends, that's the fair weather friend, and then the bad weather friends are only there for God, asking for God's help when they need it, and when God fixes their problem, fixes their situation, they drift away. As God says, as if they never had, never implored God. It's like they don't even thank God at the time when He fixes their issue. So obviously there's these two ends, right? And so when God says that Satan has promised He'll come from the right and the left, so there's different angles, different sides in which He may come to try to get us to fail our test. So God teaches us with many examples, and God teaches us in the Quran to never despair, and He has detailed us with many great examples of many exemplary and pious submitters who showed that they never despaired of God's mercy and they never despaired of God's grace. And that means that they also didn't give up on God. They didn't lose hope when things were looking so bad that it seemed like there was no hope. And not any, but most people will give up at that point, and then just despair and just say, just forget it, just leave it. This is how things are supposed to be, and I deserve it, and that's the end of it, But we see from these examples that, these people never despaired. And these are, not just ordinary examples. These are great examples, right? And when we put ourselves in the shoes of these people, as if we try to put ourselves in the shoes of these people and look at their circumstances, we can certainly see that they were really steadfast and they never actually truly despaired, no matter how bad the situation looked like it was, right? And it was as bad as it could get for a lot of them. So, like we can see in 39:53, proclaim, O my servants who exceeded the limits, never despair of God's mercy, for God forgives all sins. He is the forgiver, most merciful. And we have the example of Joseph, one of them. God says in 12:87, O my sons, this is obviously, Jacob telling his sons, after many long years of separation from two of his most beloved children, that he was separated for many, many years. Any other person that in this world, may have despaired by that time, accepting that they're never going to see their child again, but he had hope from God and information from God, inspiration from God that he truly believed in. Sometimes God may even inspire someone about a situation, but they may be so much in despair that they won't believe it until they see it. But Jacob actually believed it, and he just didn't believe it in his heart. He believed it enough to the point that he told his sons to go fetch him. Any other person may feel like, others may think that they have lost their mind, which his sons did when he said that. He thought he was in his old confusion, they called it. But Jacob was truly a person who never despaired of God's hope, and he believed truly that one day God will restore his children back to him, his family back to him. And then we have the example of angels telling Abraham about the news of Isaac. He said, None despaired of his Lord's mercy except the strayers. So, the righteous thing to do is to never despair of God's mercy. And we have the example of Zechariah, regarding John. He said, my Lord, the bones have turned brittle in my body, and my hair is aflame with gray. As I implore you, I never despair. And we know Zechariah was very old, and at a point where he didn't think that he could ever have children. With his bones being brittle and hair being gray and everything, obviously that's makes it almost impossible physically for him to have children. But he still didn't despair, and he still didn't lose hope, and he still implored God for giving him a child, despite his old age. And so we see that many people, will make the wrong choice and start to grieve, even though God tells us not to. God tells us that when guidance comes from Him, those people who follow God's guidance will have no fear, nor will they grieve. So it's a fact also, and it's a commandment that we shouldn't fear, we shouldn't grieve. I mean, we should only be afraid of God. We should only be afraid of the day of judgment. But in regards to anything else, I mean, we should not have any fear whatsoever. We should know that God is in full control of all things, and we trust in God fully. So we shouldn't have any kind of fears. We shouldn't have any kind of grief in our hearts. 262 says the same thing, right? And 12 also says that the people who submit themselves absolutely to God alone while leading a righteous life, will receive the recompense from their Lord. They have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. And so having nothing to fear and having no grief is a way to describe the happiness. But it's a state of mind, right? If you're having fears, if you have some kind of grief on your mind, obviously you're not going to be able to enjoy happiness, right? And so this is not talking about just obviously the hereafter. It's talking about this life as well, because your heaven and hell start here. So it's not just that you'll have no fear and no grief in the hereafter when everybody else is going to hell, but also in this world you will not have any fear or any grief, because you will be in God's kingdom. And being in God's kingdom means that we trust in God, that we understand that He's running everything. He's not going to let bad things happen to us. People, for example, who live in fear and have tried to think of all the bad things that can happen, instead of just trusting in God. They're filled with all these anxieties and stuff. And this is why we see the prevalence of insurances and everything, just to bank on these people's fears. But for a submitter who is in God's kingdom, knowing that God is his Lord and Master, who's controlling everything, they trust in God, then there's absolutely no room for any kind of fear or any kind of anxiety to come and bother us. And so once we have our complete trust in God, then slowly we can start to feel stronger and happier and feel more at ease and comfort, in addition to getting all the promises from God and getting all the rewards that God has promised us. But we'll generally be much, much happier. We'll generally be, much more satisfied with everything. And, our state of happiness will increase. Our quality of life will improve. Our health will improve as well, our mental health, as well as our physical health. We know so many diseases and so many things that complications that naturally happen to people from anxieties and sadness and all these things, right? So none of those things will bother them, and so obviously they'll have a better health, also a better mental health, and so at the same time we're making more into our post-retirement account, and we are pleasing God, and we are passing our test, God willing. So this let's repent. Tubu ilallah. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. So we know, people often talk about money as something that cannot buy people happiness, and then you have people that talk about so many things like diamond, things like diamonds, or material things, anything, luxuries, and people opt for all these things with money, and then you have people telling them that money doesn't buy happiness, and you see all the rich people in this world which are unhappy as a result, right? So we understand that money in itself doesn't have any kind of ability to make people happy. But there's something that God promises us, that if we are charitable with our money, our resources, that will bring us happiness in this world. And we understand that it's a love, it's a kind of a dependence that people have. And God says we cannot achieve righteousness until we give from the things we love the most, right? And this is kind of letting go of the dependence we have on the worldly materials, and shows our trust in God. And every time we give to charity, it shows that we're really investing in what matters to us, which is the life of the hereafter. As compared to someone who's only investing of things of this world, buying things, investing in bodily things, but not caring about the hereafter, because they don't believe that it will ever exist. As God says, many people think that it is a waste, to spend money in the cause of God, or be charitable. But God says those who believe, this is in Surah 2, verse 62 through 237. It says, those who spend their money in the cause of God, then do not follow their charity with insult or harm, will receive their recompense from their Lord. They have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. Those who give to charity night and day, secretly and publicly, receive their recompense from their Lord. They will have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. And so this is God's promise. And then also we have divine guarantee, subtitled in 2:227. It says, those who believe and lead a righteous life and observe the contact prayer, salat, and give the obligatory charity, they receive their recompense from their Lord. They will have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. And then God says in 3:139, you shall not waver, nor shall you grieve, for you are the ultimate victors if you are believers, right? So God promises the believers that in the end, everything is going to be fine, And if you just understand the fact that, if you believe in God and you lead a righteous life, in the end, everything is going to be fine, You can tell yourself that, all the time when bad things or seemingly bad things are happening, things are not going as you planned, things are happening sort of in a way of its own, because God is running everything. We're not in control of anything. So God allows things to happen in a way, and so we just have to submit at that time when things are happening around us, especially when we're going through something, that might appear stressful or busy. Let's say you're taking care of 20 different things at one time, and you want them all to go in a certain way, but then obviously you're not in control, God is in control, so some of those things might not happen in the way we want them. Sometimes, there are good reasons for things to happen, and we don't understand that, but when we later look back and we realize, okay, there was a good reason that this didn't happen and that didn't happen, or this thing happened a certain way. And so we should remember that God says in 3:153, He substituted one misery after another for another, that you may not grieve over anything you had missed, or agonize over any hardship you had suffered. And then 3:170 says, also they're rejoicing in God's grace now in the hereafter, these people, and they have good news for their comrades who did not die with them, that they have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. So these, and there's obviously other verses, as we can see, in the Quran, that talk about that. So the thing is, so the grieveness and agonizing over things that we miss, like for example, I may lose some amount of money on something, right? And I can choose to agonize over it and be sad about it, or I can choose to just let it go, right? It's better to let it go, obviously, because it's going to be a source of grief for you, a source of agony, a source of regret, and obviously God doesn't want us to have any of those things. And God promises, the believers that, they will not have this sort of an outcome for themselves. And then also, we have to learn to be patient and to not be annoyed no matter what. And God says in 16:127, you shall resort to patience, and your patience is attainable only with God's help. Do not grieve over them, and do not be annoyed by their schemes, right? So we should not be annoyed by things around us. Sometimes it can be difficult, especially when we're in unknown surroundings, or things we're not accustomed to, or things we're not expecting, and things just happen out of the blue and we're not prepared, and we can just naturally, being unprepared, to handle such a situation, our immediate reaction can be annoyance or getting upset, right? But God says that we should always resort to patience. And we should not grieve or be annoyed by people's schemes. Obviously, we live in Satan's domain, and Satan will try to test us, in accordance with God's will, to try to claim us in more ways than one, and more ways than we can sometimes see. There may be enemies that we may or may not know, and they might try to scheme, for example, but we have to remember that God is controlling everything, and God is the one who is running the whole show. So these schemes, even though we may even see them happening around us, we cannot be annoyed by them. Knowing that God is in full control of all things, God allowed a certain scheme, let's say, to take place, but this exposes the people who try to scheme, and at the same time we have trust in God that no matter what the people scheme, God will eventually protect us anyways. And we should not be sad for anything that we miss. God says, everything is predetermined by God, in the sense that God already knows eventually what we're going to get. Like, for example, as the example that the Messenger of the Covenant gives, you may decide to change your flight. You may try to change your flight from Los Angeles to New York, but at the end, God knows that you're going to fly from Los Angeles to New York no matter what, and it's already, in a way, predetermined by God, right? So predetermined in the sense that God already knows what the outcome is going to be, what you're going to choose, and it's already happened. So having regret that maybe if I did this, that will happen, or this will happen, it's kind of useless, because even though theoretically in our minds it may make some logic or some sense, thinking that if things happen a certain way, I could be this place or I could be that place, but we know that it's useless, because as far as God is concerned, there was a path that God already knew was going to happen, and we were going to take that path no matter what. So it couldn't be done in different ways, like, for example, this reminds me of people talking about, like, alternative universes where, like, complex situations could happen and stuff, where, it's just a way to just really to entertain people's brains, but really there's no such thing. But, like, there couldn't be like 20 different outcomes, like, for example, we buy something. That's a simple example. I think the simplest thing I could think of. Like this, they talk about the buyer's remorse. Sometimes a person buys something, and then he's kind of sad, or he's kind of confused. Like, maybe I should have bought this thing, or maybe I should have bought this other thing. Just an example. Obviously, it doesn't have to be about buying anything, but it could be about anything else, like a house, or I don't know, or going to a destination, or anything else. Right? And we could say, well, maybe I could have gotten that. Oh, I wish I didn't choose this one. I should have choose the other one, or something like that, Or I wish I didn't get this job. I wish I got this other job, or wish I got this other business, whatever, But we know, as far as God is concerned, things are supposed to happen, and those things are going to happen, and we can't change them no matter what. So if we think we lost something, or if we think we missed something, it was supposed to happen anyways. And there was nothing we could do to change it. There's one outcome that's supposed to happen, a series of events that we're all going to pass through, which are already predetermined by God, known by God, and God already knew that's something that's going to happen, and we're just living through that. So grieving over it or agonizing over it or regretting anything obviously doesn't make any sense when we think about it in a logical way. And so also we understand that there's a good reason for everything, right? I mean, we learn that if we disobey God, we hurt our souls, and we are actually unappreciative when we grieve. So and we can also even encompass God's blessings, and how blessed we are, and just the fact that God has allowed us to have the message, just to have the awareness of why we are here, what is going on. I mean, just this very information that we are being put to this test. I mean, this is invaluable information, but also we have so many things, so many blessings that we can thank God at any given moment, right? But yet when we choose to complain, or when we choose to object, or when we choose to be sad, or when we choose to regret or remorse any of those things, we choose to be unappreciative instead of being appreciative. Like, I could thank God for 20 different things right now that God has given me, right? But there could be one or two things that I might not like about myself, and I have the choice to think about those two things that I don't like, or I have the choice to be appreciative and thank God for the 20 other things that He has given me that are great, and they don't even have to be great. I mean, just the fact that I have things that everybody else, most people have, like, for example, eyes, right? Everybody has eyes. Most people have eyes, but imagine, if you don't have your eyes, but God has given us these eyes. We can thank God for it now. He has given us a brain. He has given us the ears. I mean, legs, limbs. I mean, people don't have, right? But we choose to complain about the person who cut us off in traffic, for example, and that's a choice we made at the time. I mean, we could be. We could thank God that He has given us a means of transportation at that time, or at least knowing that God allowed this person to pass through, and for us to not object or complain or lose our temper when it happened, right? So so we're actually making these choices at the time that we could make, that given the information that God has given us, we can make better choices. But obviously we know it's not easy, right? If it was easy, we would all be doing it right now, but we know we fail, and we know that it involves actively training ourselves, actively telling ourselves, reminding ourselves, me included, obviously, because I'm doing it all the time sometimes, or more times than I would, try to be better, that I would do it, so I have to remind myself, we have to remind each other when we see ourselves failing in this manner, that God is running everything, and we should do better. And God guides us in these ways to create happiness in our lives. Happiness, it comes from within. It's something that God has created through the choices we make in our lives. And so one of those choices obviously is also how we treat other people. God says, "Tell my servants to treat each other in the best possible manner." And God says, the believers are members of one family. You shall keep the peace within your family. So obviously, if we hurt someone, we cause them to feel bad. Obviously, bad things are going to happen to us too, because God says, it's a consequence, right? And if you hurt someone, you're going to get hurt too, eventually. So we have to remember, to treat other people as it says in the Bible, the way we like to be treated. And so we try to treat the people that we deal with as we like ourselves to be treated. And so sometimes that can be difficult too, especially when the people that we're interacting with might be in some way considered lower than us, right? Let's say the person you're communicating with is an employee of yours, or someone is more poor, or something like that. They're in a situation where they're socially disadvantaged in some manner, right? And so people have the tendency to become proud, or become arrogant, or be rude, or be inconsiderate and insensitive, and just people in general are selfish creatures, and so they might not care about other people, right? But we should set a better example as submitters to be able to anticipate those feelings. Let's say, we're going to a store, and someone, talks to us in a way that we may feel is rude, right? But we don't know, we don't know what this person's life might be like. Maybe he's having a tough day. Maybe he's going through a lot of stress, right? And so we should, try to ease them and make them feel better instead of getting offended, for example, which is what we see people normally do. Like, this person's so rude, and over time we pick up bad habits from other people too, that they're disbelievers without even realizing. But we see the disbelievers exhibiting these behaviors all the time, right? And we know why, because God says selfishness is a human trait. So we should not be arrogant or proud. God says in 31:16 to 25, we have to lower our voices, we have to walk humbly, we should not be proud show-offs, and treat people with kindness, and we have to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. And so these are the verses 31:16 through 19 that remind us of that. So that we can feel the inner happiness that God has promised for us. We must be appreciative and recognize that God is running everything. God says He has showered us with His blessings, and He obvious or hidden, and so we should remember God and recognize those blessings that God has given us. There are blessings that He says are obvious, and there's blessings that are hidden. So we should think about those blessings, right? We should try to ponder on the blessings, and we should understand that God is in full control of all things. That's 31:22 says, those who submit completely to God while leading a righteous life have gotten hold of the strongest bond, for God is in full control of all things. And so there are people who are actually going to hell just for this very fact that they say they believe in God, but they don't know who God is. They don't understand, or even they may even say with their lip service that, yeah, God controls everything, but then they don't fully grasp it, they don't practice it in their lives. And other things that we can do, to set example for others, is God says not to spread rumors, not to ridicule other believers, not to be suspicious about them. We have verses from setting the example about from 49:10 to 49:11. We shouldn't backbite each other, and these are all very, very important commandments for us in order to stay within God's kingdom, and in order to set the best example. And we should counter evil with good. We should be nice and patient, and resort to the best possible manner, right? God says in 41:34, not equal is a good response and the bad response. You shall resort to the nicest possible response. Thus the one who used to be your enemy may become your best friend. And so obviously, God says only the fortunate people can achieve it, and we should counter evil with good. God says resort to pardon, advocate tolerance, and disregard the ignorant. And this is something that we must practice on a daily basis. Also, we must sever our dependence on anything that bothers us, right? God says in 22:15, if anyone thinks that God cannot support him in this life and the hereafter, let him turn completely to his Creator. He will see that this plan eliminates anything that bothers him, right? So anything that bothers him, anything that takes away from our happiness, we should sever our dependence on it, right? Because we cannot be tied, our happiness cannot be tied to these things in this world in order for us to be happy. In order for us to be happy, we need God alone in our lives. And so if there's anything other than that that is affecting our happiness, that means that it is more important to us than our happiness with God. We're putting more dependence on these things, that it is becoming our God. And so we shouldn't allow anything. And if there is such a thing in our life, we should sever our dependence of happiness. Like your happiness should not be surrounded by pleasing a certain person, or having a certain thing, for example, or achieving a certain outcome. Your happiness should depend completely on God and completely on your growth of your soul. And so if there's other things that can disrupt that, you should try to sever your dependence on those things, as God is saying. And we should make it our zikr that God is doing everything. Every day we should remind ourselves, as the messenger of the covenant has stated, that do it so much that it becomes a zikr that every cell in your body is saying it. You should know it in your subconscious without even thinking that God is controlling everything. You shouldn't have to tell yourself at every single point, but obviously, in the beginning it's going to be tough. It's going to come with practice. Even the bad things that are happening, we understand that God is allowing it to happen. For example, Joseph, in the case of Joseph, when the brothers decide to throw him in the well, they think that they decided to throw him in the well, but it was already in accordance with God's will. God is the one who allowed it to happen. And we know that in 8:17 it also says, it was not you who killed them, God is the one who killed them. It was not you who threw. When you threw, God is the one who threw. But he does gives the believers a chance to earn a lot of credit. So he's controlling every single thing, everything that's happening around us. God is controlling it, right? So we should always be mindful that this person is not doing this, or that person is not bringing us the nice things. This person is not being rude and doing the bad things. Everything is being controlled by God, So before we decide to object or complain or act in some other way that goes against God's commandments or goes towards hurting our souls, we should try to think and remember that God is in full control, and ask God to help us in this way and help us exercise these ideas, these commandments, in a way that it becomes second nature for us, so that we can redeem ourselves and be proud of our record in the hereafter, and truly have no regrets looking back at our lives on the day of judgment. So with this, let's pray. Akimus Salah.